What I've seen for a lot of writers, and I think this is true for a lot of different creative endeavors, if you're surrounded by a community of people that are doing that, in this case, writing songs and sharing them, it makes it so much easier to find those songs in yourself.
You're listening to Artistry with Heart, a musician's wellness podcast. I'm Stephanie Lynn Bernards. Today, we're having a conversation with Matt Meighan, a deeply poetic, insightful, and profound songwriter whose soul radiates from his lyricism, vocals, and compositions. He inspires musicians of all levels to tap into their own creativity through the medium of songwriting, and always from a place of authenticity and truth. Matt teaches songwriting as truth-telling, a course for songwriters of all levels, and he hosts songwriting workshops annually in Ireland and Italy. Matt, I'm so honored to have you with me today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I love what you're doing, and it's really good to see you. So
it's great to see you too. It's been too long.
Yeah.
You have truly been such a guiding light and inspiration to so many songwriters out there, including myself. And your gift is at once both deeply, your music it's at once deeply intellectual and approachable at the same time, which is a true gift that I've been lucky enough to witness and learn from. So, Matt, when I was reading about you and your story a little bit before this conversation, it sounds like your musical journey started around the age of 7?
Yeah, it's funny. I always used to say that I started playing when I was 11 because that's when I got my first guitar. But then I remembered, oh, wait. I actually learned the ukulele before that. I'd totally forgotten that. My dad played it, just, old folk songs sitting around the house. My sister is 3 years older and was a student at the Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago and was playing out some. I mean, she was still in high school, but she was playing out some in the coffee shops and stuff during the Chicago folk scene back then. So she taught me all kinds of songs, and she gave me a guitar when I was 11, and I never looked back.
How did it evolve over your early years into adulthood?
My sister was kind of out there gigging and stuff. I mean, partly I was shy, but I don't know. I just always did it because it was fun to do, and it made me feel better. And I knew a lot of other people. I was in high school in the 60s, so there were plenty of friends who played guitar, and to me, it was always just something we did sitting around playing. And that really continued until right around the year 2000. And I don't even know really why it shifted. I went down to the Kerrville Folk Festival in Kerrville, Texas, which is an 18-day festival. And with a big campground, and people sit around and in circles and just swap songs all day and night pretty much. I had a friend who was from Texas who really kept insisting, you need to come with me to this festival. And I didn't know anything about it. I finally just said, okay, because he kept pestering me. And I said, are we going to be playing music or something? And he there was a sort of long silence. And then he said, you'll see, bring your guitar. And, I got there and basically played for like a week straight, with various people coming and going and joining, and sometimes 2 of us, sometimes 20 of us. So that may have been, I think things were just right because that happened. I started going to a songwriter open mic every week, and I wasn't writing songs yet, but I was doing a lot of songs, by less well-known people that maybe everybody wouldn't have heard. So it sort of fit in okay, but it was an originals only open mic. What I've seen for a lot of writers, and I think this is true for a lot of different creative endeavors, if you're surrounded by a community of people that are doing that, in this case, writing songs and sharing them, it makes it so much easier to find those songs in yourself. We all have a need to know other people and be known by other people and put our truths into the world and have it heard. So that need had reached the point where it wanted to come out in that form.
And you also studied poetry, right? Is that?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, that was actually, so that might have been part of it too, because I had actually studied poetry at Naropa, which is a Buddhist school in Boulder. And the writing program there was co-founded by Allen Ginsberg. So they have a a writing program that's very beat poet focused. And I had gone there in the 90s. I actually started taking classes to become a therapist. I went through a master's degree program in transpersonal psychology. And after I completed that, I decided that wasn't really a career I wanted to pursue for a bunch of reasons. Meanwhile, I had also been taking writing classes. So I decided to just sort of switch and get a degree in poetry. So I studied lots of poetry, and it certainly informs all my songwriting. You know, anything I know about craft, I really derived from that. And it's interesting because many years later, I wound up teaching songwriting, and it's more facilitating creative process than, you know, it's not nuts and bolts stuff so much. And holding space for other people to really step into their creativity. And I realized in hindsight that the combination of transpersonal psychology degree and poetry degree was like the exact qualification for the work I wound up doing. So it feels to me like whatever leads us through life, you know, I think there is something that pulls us, kind of put me through both of those trainings. You know, I had no vision at all of winding up doing what I'm doing. But when I did start doing it, I realized, oh, those were the exact trainings I needed. So,
wow, that's fascinating. I was gonna say that you went there before me. Just that combination of skill sets that allows you to do what you do now so well and so impactfully. And
I think all of us have some inner wisdom that, like, when we're drawn to something and we don't know why, you know, whatever it is, there's a reason, and it's good to trust that because it's taking us somewhere. It's somehow resonating with some intelligence or some longing that's deep inside us that's leading us into our future. You know, it could be any weird thing. I mean, at the time, it just seemed really chaotic. Like, I think I'll be a therapist. No, I'll be a poet. You know?
Well, yeah, and I think that's just so good to hear because there are so many stories out there that you're just supposed to follow one track, or you're supposed to just know what you're supposed to be, or you're just supposed to guess and then stick with that, or there's something wrong with you if you transition or morph into something else or change directions. And I mean that on a broad scale, but I also mean that musically. I think that it's less acceptable to, you know, cross over from being like a classical pianist to being a jazz pianist, you know, or from being a jazz pianist to a classical pianist, or then, you know, well, I'm a songwriter, but I'm not an improviser, or I'm a, you know, these like sort of differentiations that we put ourselves in, or that society feels like we're supposed to be in, and how actually we're kind of all things all the time, and it's pretty rare to just stick with one route.
Totally agree with it. And also, I think the mistake we made very often, the thing we construct in our mind is some version of where we're headed, but it's not necessarily the full version. Yeah. And that we need to be willing to trust what just arises in us as something we're pulled toward, even when it doesn't really make sense.
I guess I'm curious, can you say more about just like when you're teaching songwriting, what are some fundamentals that you teach people, and how do you get people who have never written before to open up?
You have to write something new or to improvise. You have to be willing to step into the unknown, and you have to be willing to make mistakes. You know, you have to be willing for it to come out bad. Yeah. And if you're unwilling for it to come out bad, you can't do it because you don't know how it's going to come out. I think everyone has a longing to express themselves and to be heard. And so we want to try it, but it's scary because, you know, especially if you're in a group and everyone seems so amazing, it goes around, you know, it's like, are you willing to be surrounded by people that are better than you, but still welcome you and are really happy to, you know, to listen to what you have to share. And I really talk about how whenever any of us is trying to write something new, which is what we do in my class, everyone tries to write a song every week. We're always taking a step into a place where we don't know what's going to happen. And we're bringing, even if I've never written a song before, I'm bringing all my life experience. I'm bringing the thousands of songs that I've heard in my life. So I really actually know a lot about how songs work, even though I don't know I know, but I do. So Or if I'm someone who's been playing for 30 years and I have 15 albums and I tour all over the place, if I'm going to step into something new, it's still stepping into the unknown. It's actually not that different of a place. We're all at the same edge. It doesn't really make any difference. We're all trying to do the exact same thing. You bring what you have, like you said, with the improv, and you make something out of it. And so if you're a classical pianist that's learned lots of things, you have more things to bring. But it's still a creative act to say, well, what do I do with this? What do I have to say that's me? And on the other hand, if you've never touched a keyboard, but you want to sit there and find some notes and say, what do I have to say that's me? You can still do it. You can do it with 3 notes. Sometimes I read this exercise in a book, and sometimes I do it in a workshop where everyone tries to write a solo, a guitar or whatever instrument they have solo, using only 1 note.
Whoa.
And try to say something. And it's amazing. I've had people make me cry. If you really pull down the needing to know a lot and realize you're speaking from the heart, you're using the voice you have. I mean, that's what we all did when we learned how to talk, We just said things as best we could. And so I think, to me, what makes the class work is the quality of listening. If everyone really listens to one another with interest and attention and listens deeply and with respect, and I'm hearing what you want to share because I want to know who you are and what you want to share. If people really listen with their heart and just say, yeah, I feel that, you just went through a breakup and it hurts, and I feel the hurt when you sing. And once people actually feel that they're in a circle where that connection happens, when they share something, it becomes safe. Yeah. And then things start to happen, and then people are willing to take risks. Writing a song, if you've never written one, is a huge risk, and writing a song that's unlike anything you wrote before, if you've written 1,000 songs, is the same kind of risk. It's still scary, it's still uncertain, and you still don't know how people are going to react. So it doesn't feel very different to me. I think that's all stuff we do in our head. The hierarchies and comparing, and we think way too much in our culture.
We do, and I think there is a lot of pressure to do that preemptively as musicians, as artists. I feel like there's this difference between what you're talking about, which is creating from the heart and connecting and speaking your truth and using your voice, your genuine, authentic voice,
exactly,
to speak your story and to want to share that with people, that part of you with people. Right, that's one way of looking at music. And then there's this other way that I think gets into a lot of our heads that we're supposed to be, which I would say is potentially being marketable or popular or famous or any number of different things. And I don't think that they have to be mutually exclusive at all.
Not at all.
And I don't think that one is better than the other, but I've seen the first get thrown out with the latter. And I personally have also fallen victim to that. And I think I know a lot of people that have always had that voice, of, well, if you were just more this or did this or had this better voice, more interesting ideas, more interesting lyrics, more of a vibey look. I mean, there's so many different ideas of ways we could be more
marketable.
Exactly. And that's tough. I think I had a conversation with somebody the other day about that, and she brought that to my attention, and I thought it was an interesting way to put it. And I don't know, I don't know if that ties into the inner critic and if it's us trying to protect ourselves because we do want to be liked. I think that's an inherent human quality, but I think that that's one of the biggest, at least personally, and for a lot of people, it's always well, when I just get to this level, or when I just can play it like this, or if I can just book X number of gigs, or I can get X amount of streams, or I can make X amount of money, it's always this sort of stamp of approval that if we just do this external thing that then shows me that my heart is valuable and my feelings and thoughts and emotions are valuable, then I can feel good about that part too, right?
Exactly.
I don't know. I guess that's kind of a tangent, but
no, not at all. I think it's exactly the central question. And the thing is, I think a lot of us, some people, they really want to be a superstar and that's why they're doing it, or they really want to make a bunch of money or whatever. But I think most of us, the actual driving force behind why we're doing music at all is that we want to have a heart and soul connection with other people. And then, like you said it beautifully, we think that if I have a certain level of skill and knowledge and, I put on the right clothes, and then I'll, then I'll go viral and I'll get the clicks and then I'll feel connected with. Yeah. But the connection is actually the longing. And the thing is, that doesn't actually work. You can be a really well-known performer and, tour all over the place and not feel like people see who you are unless you're putting who you are in your music, which some people do when they're well-known. They're not mutually exclusive at all.
Exactly.
If you're in a room with 8 other people and they really listen and hear you, or you're at an open mic or whatever, or you're at a show and one person really listens to you and is moved, that's what matters. Mm-hmm. And if it's 10,000 people, it's not 10,000 times better. It's a little better. And it's a lot more, it's a lot more lucrative. But I think each artist has to ask themselves, is that really what I care about? Like, do I really want to be famous, or do I just want to be known? When they talk about an unknown artist, and, you want to be known for yourself. And it doesn't take a lot of people to do that. It doesn't take celebrity. Celebrity is a whole nother thing. It's not a dichotomy. You can care about both, but they're not exactly the same thing, and you could still say, well, I'm going to write music that I really care about, and I'm going to worry about my branding. They're not exclusive, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah, I could not have said that better myself. And I think that, I want to segue a little bit into this concept of performance anxiety. I know a lot of people have dealt with that. And personally, I think one of the roots of my performance anxiety, I have a couple ones that I've identified, but one of them is that fear of what other people will think, that fear and desire to be liked and wanted and seen. And I think for the longest time that has come from giving my value to the audience, right? Like if they like my music, then I'm good. If they don't like my music, then I'm not good. Or I play well and musically and impressively and people let me know, and then I feel affirmed that, yes, I'm doing the right thing. Or I perform and people don't give me that feedback, and then I'm affirmed that, in fact, no, I'm not, and I think it's that there's so much that in the past I've given so much power to the audience without them even asking for it. Right? It's like right. Total projection in my head of, I want them to like this. I want to do good. I'm afraid to make mistakes. And I think that that root of my anxiety comes from, that desire to be impressive, that desire for people to like me and to be affirmed. I'm curious if you have ever struggled with performance anxiety, and if you have you ever been able to identify what the roots of it are, and have you ever found ways to work with it?
Yes, to all those questions.
Great.
I want to, though, respond to the way you described your experience, wanting the audience to like you and be impressed and all that. To say, first of all, that is our nature as human beings. We want other human beings to like us because we're a social species. Chimpanzees feel the same way, you don't want to be the outcast. So that's just natural. The problem with bringing it into the art is that what an artist does, I think by definition, what defines art is says, this is how I feel. This is what sounds good to me, and I'm going to stand by it. It's sort of like we're having a conversation, and do I say what I feel and really believe, or do I try to figure out, what does Stephanie want me to say? And I'll say, and we all do that. And we know people who always seem to be telling us what we want to hear. It's that move of of course we want to be liked, but the art comes from a place of saying, this is me, this sounds like music to me. And if nobody else likes it, I still have to play it that way because otherwise I'm falsifying myself. And when we the artists we love do that. You know, they're very distinct. They're not like trying to figure out how to be like everyone else. They're just, we love artists who sound like, you hear a song and you're like, you know that person wrote that song, or you know that's their voice right away.
Yeah.
Because they're willing to be themselves. And it's actually, I think it's permission to do that causes a lot of people to come and want to watch an artist in the first place. Yeah, we want to hear the music, but to see a person who's willing to get up and be vulnerable and say, this is what I feel and I'm going to share it. It's powerful, and it gives you, the audience, the permission. And so I think for a performer, one of the important steps is to remember that you're getting on stage to give people something. You know, you have some music, you have yourself, and you're going to share it with them. That's a gift. And as soon as you find yourself in the position of being insecure and wanting to get something from the audience, you've flipped it around. And that's when it's an unpleasant experience. And so the need for validation and for feeling heard and known is real. And I think some people manage to get it from an audience, but as I was saying before, you can get it from a group of your friends that you get together with and share music. And the more you feel, yes, I'm heard, I'm valued for me, and I choose to value myself for me. So as far as addressing it, I think one thing is just understanding that being nervous or feeling your nervous system being elevated, that's normal. Just be like, okay, getting in front of people is stimulating, and just embrace that, okay, this is how being in front of people feels today. It doesn't mean it always feels like that. And then I think a huge thing is learning how to regulate your nervous system, stopping to feel your breathing, feel your breath, feel the ground underneath you. Just even walking up to the mic and taking 3 breaths and slowing down. When we're nervous, our nervous system is heightened, we speed up and we get tighter, tense. So if we can slow down and maybe loosen a little bit, move around, stretch before you go on stage, whatever, doing that and doing it enough times, you just gradually get more relaxed. Mm-hmm. I think if you can, as much as you're able, breathe into the moment and be as present as you can. And that to me even includes, instead of thinking, man, I'm really nervous, think, wow, my hands are shaking or my heart's beating fast. Like, be specific about what you're actually feeling. And then think, well, I can sing with my heart beating fast. It's okay. Like that's, because we also think, oh, this is going to ruin everything and I'm going to be terrible. And so we create this catastrophe in our head. Just be like, okay, I'm going to sing nervous today. On some days, we're not going to give our best possible performance. That's just bound to happen. And that's okay. I mean, nobody does the best they can be every time. Like it's be like, only swing the bat if it's going to be a home run, and otherwise stand still. You would never swing.
Yeah. It's a great way to put it. Yeah. You said we pathologize anxiety and then we catastrophize it, right? Like thinking it will lead to disasters before they even happen. And then you said we also try to push our anxiety away.
Oh, yeah.
Or stuff it, which is the exact opposite of what helps. You also said a great tactic, which I forgot to try, which is that before shows, you'll walk around and try to talk to people before you perform. And that's such a great tool. And I am curious why that helps you.
When I was first performing, I remember my friend Danny, the same one with the open mic, used to be so natural and relaxed on stage. And I said to a friend, wow, I wish I was like Danny, I wish I could just get up there and be myself. And she said, oh, you should have seen him 2 years ago. He was like, dropping things and totally, and I couldn't believe it, and I remember thinking, okay, I'm just going to do 100 shows like badly, and maybe I'll learn from it, rather than expecting to be relaxed right off the bat. So that helped. But the other thing is I started watching people who I thought were really good on stage and just watching, like, what are they doing now that I don't do? And one of the things was that because my friends who were on stage are naturally extroverted people, which is the opposite of me, was they would walk around and like talk to everybody in the place,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I could never do that, But I had a gig at Hotel Oregon. I used to play there a lot in a little bar downstairs. So it's only like, I don't know, 8 or 10 tables in a bar. There's not very many people. And I just decided, okay, I'm going to force myself to do that. And it felt really awkward. At first, I felt really fake, but pretty quickly, I'm like, do you guys live in McMinnville? And they'd be like, no, we're here on a fishing trip, and we talk about fishing a little bit. And then the next person would like, we're here, we got married here 10 years ago, so we're back. And then when I got up on stage, instead of like this construct in my head, like there's an audience out there, and, it was like these people I had just spoken to, and I knew something about them.
Yeah. And I think also, just before we wrap up this component of like, performance anxiety, where the roots come from, how to deal with it, just a little bit more about the inner critic and how you personally deal with that when you're songwriting yourself and when you're teaching songwriting. Something you said that I really liked is that you said, if the critic arises when writing, I find it's important for me to distinguish between the inner editor and the inner critic. The inner critic is social fear. It's the part that wants to keep me safe. Safety is a good thing, so the critic means well. But it's a concern about other people, not about the song. So I'm curious if you could say more about what you said, what I just read from the answers that you gave me. Can you say more about the inner editor versus inner critic, or how you deal with it?
Yes. Yeah. I think the first thing is making the distinction. Yeah. If anything is to anything, that's the critic. Because what's the right amount of X, Yeah. That's for you to decide. You're the artist. But the critic knows that, and it's just the voice of fear. It's a voice of wanting other people to like us and wanting to keep us safe. So we don't want to be too vulnerable. We don't want to be too corny. We don't want to be too depressing, So that's, again, it's a natural part of us. We're social beings, so we care what other people think. But that has nothing to do with whether the line actually works or not. Right. It has to do with whether we feel safe saying that. And in fact, I've come to feel like when I hear the critic get really activated, because I've got a point now where it's not usually activated, but what it is, then I'm like, okay, now I'm on to something, because it means I feel vulnerable. And of course, vulnerability, the place we feel vulnerable is where we're at our edge. We're out of our comfort zone. We're not just doing something we feel confident about. We're doing something we feel unconfident about. And then that part that wants to keep us from getting hurt speaks up. The inner editor, so the critic's goal is to keep us safe and make sure we don't do anything that will embarrass us. The editor's goal is to make the work as strong and true and powerful and beautiful as possible. The inner editor might, as I'm playing a song that I've written, it might say, that line's not really doing much. It's kind of weak. Maybe there's a stronger way to say that. Or that line might confuse people. I wonder if I can say it with more clarity.
Yeah.
But a big difference is the editor makes us work harder. So, like, see if there's a better line than that, where the critic says, don't do that. And if we really listen to the critic, we would stop writing all together and go watch Netflix or something. It wants us to stop. And if you think about like the difference between a film critic and a film editor, the film editor is in there trying to make the movie as good as possible and saying, okay, this scene, we're going to cut it out, but we're going to put this in. The critic is only about telling other people whether they should waste their time coming to see you or not. That's what the critic does. They tell other people. So I think it's really good just to know who you're hearing from. Yeah. And when it's the critic, then I actually talk to it. And I'll say things like, okay, I can feel that I feel that you don't think I should share this song with anyone. So I'll make a deal with you. You go in the other room, and after it's finished, before I play it for anyone, I'll run it by you, and you can tell me why I shouldn't. But right now I'm just trying to write it. So give me some peace, And the truth is, you do have to make a decision if you're playing a particular show, like, is this the right song for this audience? Is it too risque and there's kids in the audience, or, it's a party and people want to have a good time. I might not bring out my trauma song, I mean, you do have to think about what you're playing for people, but you don't have to think about that when you're writing. Yeah. And one of the other signs for me is that very often we're writing a song and we're already we're picturing in our mind, playing it for someone and how they're responding. So we have a little movie in our head about, wow, everyone's going to love this and everyone's going to laugh at this line, or, this is going to really embarrass me and people are going to think I'm stupid. Whatever it is, whatever fantasy we're having, we're not in the room writing the song anymore. We're in an imaginary future playing for an imaginary audience. That's not a good place to write from. So you have to set it aside and say, okay, when that day comes, I will give some thought to whether I should play this song or not. But I don't need to worry about that right now. I'm alone. I'm writing, So it's separating things in time, separating the critique. After the song's done, let it sit for a week. Then you can look at it and go, I really want to rewrite this. You don't have to do that in the middle of every line because it's too inhibiting. I think there's a piece, too, about self-kindness. I think the critic a lot of times is sort of like our inner child. It's the part of us that's scared. The world's scary, and also bad shit's probably happened in the past for most of us.
Yeah, exactly.
So, just to treat it like you would a frightened child, and just go, okay, it's okay. I know you're scared. We'll just take some breaths and we'll be okay up here. Exactly. Just be kind to yourself. It's really easy for us to be less kind to ourselves than we would be to anyone else.
Definitely. Yeah. And on that same vein, being compassionate towards ourselves and being kind. I'm curious, how you honor your mind, body, spirit as a musician when you also have all these other ideas floating around, right? Of just how much we're performing, how much we're writing, how much this and that. Even if we deal with the inner critic and our performance anxiety and these different elements that maybe tend to offer creative blocks or hold us back, even without those, I still think it's pretty easy to lose sight of honoring ourselves in the process. I'm just curious, what you do to honor yourself.
I really like that question because I actually don't quite understand it.
I'll ask it in a different way. How do you actively honor your authentic musical voice?
I think by using it. Writing's different every time, and sometimes you're more constructing it from kind of your knowledge and your strategies and what you know about rhyme or whatever. And other times it's really just arriving. And very often it's sort of a dance between those two. There's some phrase that pops in or some image or so one of the things I practice that I think honors the authentic voice, and then I encourage people a lot, I bring this up a lot in my workshops, is that you let the song lead. So I have an idea, I think I'm writing about this, and I'm going along, and all of a sudden some weird image or some weird musical thing comes to me, then I go with it. It's sort of like in improv, you always have to go with whatever the person does. You can't say no. Yeah. And just see where it takes me. It's not, I don't do it live real time on stage, so it's not irrevocable. If something takes me in a weird direction and it doesn't work, so nothing's lost really except some time. But I think trusting the song to speak and in its own voice, which may not be what I think is my voice, but the song's coming out a certain way. And I've even had lines where I didn't really even agree with them. I'm very I can't say that. That, I don't agree with that. But then I'll say, okay, well, that's what the song wants to say. So I'm going to leave it in. But I just think using your voice and trusting that there's a voice within you that emerges that is more truly you than the voice and to follow that and see where it takes you.
Would you say that's connected to your why? Why music? Why do you choose music as a vehicle of your personal expression? Do you think it's connected to what you were just saying?
I do. I've written songs that when they start emerging, they start talking about things that I really, like very difficult, painful things that I really wasn't planning on writing about. And I've gone with them, and it's been an incredibly healing experience in the moment of the act of writing it, of giving a voice to a particular experience. Sometimes it's deeply healing. And then to my somewhat amazement, those songs turn out to be healing to other people too, which wasn't my intention. My intention was just to follow my own voice, and something in me that needed to be said for my own healing or my own development or my own sanity, for my own making sense of my experience. So I trusted it. And even if I never played it for people, it still was a healing experience. And then playing it and having it be heard and received and have people be affected by it is another healing experience for me and them. It doesn't mean it has to be heavy or deep, but it's authentic. I think then when we do that, we become more ourselves. And I guess that is probably why I do it. And, I would do it if other people didn't want to listen to me. But it turns out some people do. So, that's just gravy.
So do you have any nugget of wisdom or inspiration for any people out there that, want to get out there and songwrite or want to explore their own creative musical voice, but either haven't really done it or maybe haven't done it for a while, or maybe you're in a slump?
I think there's always, if we've been neglecting our creativity for any reason, and a lot of times it's actually for good reasons, and sometimes it's fear, but it's also, we have a job or we have kids or whatever, feel like we've neglected it. When we turn back toward it, part of what makes that difficult is we feel this grief about having neglected it. If only I've been doing this all along. And I think it's, again, the self-kindness, and there is something, I think, intrinsic to the human condition that we want to experience the light or the source or the divine, whatever it is. But because we're human, we can't do that all the time. We would dissolve and turn into light beings or something. So we are always turning away and coming back. And there's always a grief when we've stayed away too long. And that you just have to sort of navigate that grief. Like, it's okay to be sad that, I haven't written something in a year or 20 years, whatever it is, or I haven't picked up my instrument for 10 years. That almost makes it easier not to pick it up now, because if I pick it up now, then that grief comes up. And also I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, and I used to be able to play and all that. And just to be kind, and that's part of there is a lot of griefs in the world right now. There's a lot of historical reckoning coming up for the horrible transgressions that have happened historically, and pain and a suffering that never got digested, that we kind of as a culture just pushed down. And then there's all the suffering that's happening right now with climate change and species extinction and populations getting displaced and wars. And part of what's present is all of that grief. And it's a lot. So, not to be willing to experience our portion of that, which is a tiny little drop of it. It's not, you can't take on the whole world's sorrow, but to feel some of it and maybe try to give it a voice in some kind of work of art is a service.
That's really good. In the vein or on the note, you chose to share your really deep, beautiful, poetic original piece titled Shadow. I'm wondering if you could share about the inspiration behind this piece and what it means to you.
I was at my songwriting camp that I run in July, and I woke up in the morning and I had the Gordon Lightfoot song, "In the Early Morning Rain," going through my head, which I've never played before, but I can, and I don't know all the lyrics. But I picked up my guitar and I played it. It's a pretty chord progression. And I was like, oh, I like that. I think I'll use that. It's like C, E minor, D minor. So I didn't want it to sound like Early Morning Rain, so I changed it to C major 7, E minor 7, D minor 7, G9, and played it more in a jazz shape kind of chord. So then I just started playing that, and one of the song prompts I often give is to write a song that is you talking to the muse or the muse talking to you, and the muse being whatever that is that just happens. Sometimes it inspires us. The muse is sort of shorthand for it. So I was playing this music, and I thought, well, I haven't written one like that, because I give it the prompt. So I started just talking to the muse. And what was cool for me is that the song emerged in real time, like it was a real-time conversation. And I was thinking around then a lot about how when artists talk about the muse or inspiration or whatever it is, that we always tend to talk about it as something that comes and goes. You know, some days the muse finds you, and other days you're sitting there and the muse is nowhere to be found. And I was thinking about how, for some reason, I had the thought that that's not true. The muse is just life. It's always there. We come and go. Sometimes we turn toward it, and sometimes we turn away from it. And when I got to the last verse, this picture just popped in my head of the light, you know, the light of inspiration or the light of life behind me, and me walking away from it, you know, and another turn away, because we always turn away. Every time we turn toward it, we eventually turn away. That's just being human. We have other stuff to do, you know, besides be inspired. And we really do. So it's okay. But I had this image of turning away and walking away from the light, and I saw like a light cast on the ground in front of me and my shadow. And it struck me that shadow was the love of the light behind me, because without that light, there wouldn't be that shadow. And so that the shadow was the light. That really just like appeared in my mind as I was singing. And then I was like, okay, that's the end of the song. But
that's powerful. Yeah, that idea of the light, the divine, the source, whatever we
yeah, exactly.
And comes back. It's ever present, and it's our awareness of it and our willingness to be receptive of it and turning towards it. And even the shadow is a reminder that it will always be there. I love that. I love that so much. I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Matt. This has been so inspiring, so encouraging, soul nourishing. I am really excited to take these ideas and use them myself and for people to hear this episode.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's really fun talking with you.
So I'm curious how people can get in touch with you. You have your website, Matt Meighan, MattMeighan, right, .com.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your YouTube channel, and you have your workshops.
They're on the website, the ones I'm doing now, and my email's on there. If you want to, I send out an email about every 6 weeks or something. I don't know, less than once a month.
Thank you again, Matt, for your time and your wisdom and your expertise. It's just really special to have you share your wisdom. Well, that's all for now. Until next time, be you and stay inspired.
Hey, I know it's been a long time. It may not show, but you've been on my mind. It's just that your light sometimes strikes me blind. I walk away and leave the light behind. Yes, I know life is better with you, and I know you're always there for me. I'm scared to show things that I've been through, or to live the life you show to me. But every time I turn away, I feel so alone. When I return, you always say, welcome home. It's so good to spend this time with you. This time, maybe I could stay. I saw your love in the shadow I threw, in the light you shone, as I walked away. I saw your love in the shadow I threw, in the light you shone, as I walked away. Thanks very much.